So, today we're talking about understanding the power of long term goals. And by long term goals, we really can think about these, as, something that you want to accomplish in 5 years, 10 years, but it also could be something that you want to accomplish next year. So, in 2021, right? 12 months from now or 13 months from now is a long time when we think about everything that's been going on. So, when I say long term, you get to define what that means for you. You can define that, in any way you'd like. But everything that we talk about today really does kind of speak to those different areas of, kind of long term goals. So I know most of you here, but again, my name is Jen Vondenbrink, and goal setting is a passion of mine. Just like set kind of all my systems and processes and everything else. I started, it was 2 weeks ago, my 2021 goal setting, and like I get really excited. I just like can't wait to kind of dive in and figure out, and what does this look like. And I was thinking back to last year when I was doing this process and thinking about 2020. Who knew COVID was going to happen, right? And but then I thought about it, and I was like, I'm so glad I did 2020 goals, because they allowed me, when I did have to pivot, to keep my focus, right? Where do I want to go? Yeah, I didn't maybe reach my revenue goals or whatever, but I actually exceeded the number of people that I wanted to touch this year. So I have a goal around that. How many people do I want to engage with, whether they're participants in a class or a speaking gig or whatever. And I have actually already exceeded that for the year, because over the summer I was able to do 40 webinars on various topics and everything else. So again, maybe I didn't, achieve all of my goals, but it helped me keep my focus. It helped me say, what do I want to do? What do I want to achieve, et cetera, in order to kind of keep moving forward. Which, now that I look back on it, like my jaw drops when I think about it. I'm like, I did what? What was that all about? Right. But again, I'm so grateful to that, kind of now that we're here toward the end of the year. But this is one of my favorite sayings, right? When we think about long-term goals, a lot of times we'll be like, "Oh yeah, someday I'll get there." And I'm like, "Okay, wait, will you? Will you not?" There's always that kind of, we want to travel. We want to, I don't know, make a certain dollar figure. We want to buy a house, whatever it is. But if we don't necessarily think about what that plan looks like, even if it's in the vague form, we actually may never get there, or we might get there like much later than perhaps we wanted to or needed to, right? So, there's the power, the initial power is just owning kind of where you want to go and what does that look like. And even if the course changes a little bit, at least eventually you'll get someplace toward the island, right? Rather than just kind of, putting it out there saying, oh, yeah, someday I'll do this, someday I'll do that. And goals themselves, right? People have different reactions to goals. I get excited, but some people get stressed out. Some people, like it panics them when I'm talking with certain clients and I'll say something like, well, where do you think you want to be in 5 years? And they will like freak out on me, because they're like, oh, I don't know, who knows, right? And they get almost defensive about, kind of thinking about goals. So when we're looking at long-term goals, we first have to look inside and kind of say, okay, what is my natural reaction to setting these goals? Do I get excited? Do I get fearful? Because we need to deal with those feelings, those emotions, in order to be able to move forward, right? Because I can go to that fear place or that doubt place, and now that's going to affect how I set goals. And the same with getting excited, right? I get so excited that I overextend my goals, right? Oh, sure, I can do that. Yeah, I'm able to whatever, right? And it takes both sides of my brain to get together, which we'll talk about next week, and kind of creating that vision, right? But it takes both sides of my brain to come together to say, oh, Jen, I don't know if you're able to do that. right? And really put pen to paper and look at the numbers or look at the, what's realistic, right? So it takes kind of that dreamer side of my brain and it takes that logical side of my brain, to really kind of, that excitement is great, but it can also, make me not set good goals, right? So we want to kind of start there, think about, when you think about setting a year goal, a 5-year goal, a 10-year goal, what's that first thing that bubbles up, right? What's that first kind of feeling that bubbles up? And then being able to kind of say, okay, how do I tap into that, or how do I deal with that? Very, very, very important. And then, I think the next thing along with that is we always have to recognize that goals require some kind of change. Typically, you're not setting a goal that says, hey, I want to kind of stay exactly the same, for the next 12 months or for the next 5 years or for the next 10 years, right? Usually you're saying, okay, I want to grow in some way, or I want to advance in some way, or I want to grow my business, or whatever it is. All of that means change. All of that means change. It means change in systems, change in behaviors, change in mindset. I had one client who, um, hang on, we have somebody joining us. Here we go. I have one client who, wanted to set some really extreme, sales goals for themselves. And unfortunately, that just wasn't going to happen with where they were, what they could do, the systems they had in place. Like it just literally could not happen. So, we have to recognize that, and if I want to make a 200% leap in my business, that means things need to look different and I need to work on that. I need to figure that out. Or, if I want to lose, 50 pounds, that means a lot of change, right? A lot of change in habits and things like that. So, one of the tools that I use all of the time, and anybody who's been to, any of my kind of more management trainings have seen this, but this is my favorite model of all time. But this is kind of a model of what a human being goes through when they go through change, in a very simplified kind of fun format, right? But we start off at the top here, right, where the little guy is kind of clicking his heels, and we're like, woohoo, I'm setting these goals. This is going to be great. I can't wait till, I can, I don't know, run a marathon or whatever. But as soon as we start training, right, we go down that hill and we're like, whoa, this is bigger than I thought. Oh my gosh. I have to train every day. I have to eat different. I have to whatever. And what's interesting as we kind of go through this process, this is related also to the William Bridges kind of transition process. We have to let go of what was before, right? So even with COVID, we've had to let go of what was going on in January, what was going on last December doesn't may not be pertinent to what we're doing today if we're working from home or whatever. So we kind of come down this path and we get to this point, right, where the little guy is saying kind of, who am I? And what that really is, it's, kind of not this major life revelation or anything, but what it is, that's our juncture where we're letting go of what was, right? So if my business currently is making $100,000 and I want it to make $200,000, and I know that there's structural changes that need to take place, the who am I is like, I'm a person who runs a $200,000 business or whatever, right? I'm a person who weighs, 150 pounds. I'm a person who, whatever. And all of a sudden, we make that mental shift, right? And that's when, our goals kick into gear and we're like, yeah, let's do this. Let's go, let's go, let's go. But along the way, this curve here, as we'll look at in another model in just a second, this curve here is where we get derailed. This is where the doubt comes in. This is where the frustration comes in. This is where the longing comes into whatever was before. Even if it was like not the scenario you wanted, you still was comfortable. You knew what to expect, right? So when we get past this who am I stage, and we're like, okay, I am that person who, that's when all of a sudden the change becomes easier. That's when, we start making more progress. That's when kind of the scales are tipped in our favor. But we can get off track in a couple of ways. First, we can actually go into denial, especially with long-term goals, right? Hey, I want to do that in 5 years. So you go into denial for 3 or 4 years and all of a sudden it's like the 4th year of year 5 and you're like, "Whoa, I got to like do some stuff." So that's denial, right? Other things come in, other priorities come in. I see this when, we're working together, like for, let's say, a year long stretch, like, your 2021 goals or your 2020 goals. And, everything is like gung ho at the beginning. And then March, it starts to fade off and other priorities come in. That's not necessarily always denial, but denial can kind of creep in there. Oh, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. I'll get to it. Right. The second thing that happens, that can happen as we're kind of going through this letting go of what was before, is disillusionment. And what that means in this scenario is you actually completely exit the process, right? So you give up the goal. You might formally give up the goal, like, I'm not doing that. Or you might just mentally give up the goal, where you're like, okay, I'm too busy for that, or you know what, maybe I'll work on that next year or whatever. But you exit the process completely, right? And again, for a goal, it might be consciously or it might be unconsciously. For, let's say, in change in general, disillusionment might look like, if, let's say, it's a change in your organization, your company, your business, whatever. It might be mean that you actually drop a product line, exit a group, but you actually disconnect completely from whatever it was, and you go back to what you were doing before. So that's disillusionment. Then we have this little guy down here, and he's called hostility. And I hope you never get to this place with your goals, because that basically means you achieve your goal, but you're really angry about it. You're really angry that you had to change. Or you didn't even change. You still held on to maybe the mentality of before, but you're really angry now, even though you're achieving your goals, right? And it's been interesting with COVID, because with some smaller businesses, especially like essential businesses, I've completely seen this, right? Because they got overwhelmed. They got overwhelmed with business. So they actually exceeded their business goals. And many of them were really angry because they never transitioned. They never actually made the change that it would take to, kind of have that ramp up in business. They didn't have time to do it. They weren't thinking about that. They weren't mentally processing that. So they were still trying to operate like they were that, their old March, right? But with a March that was way, way, way above wherever they could be. And the anger, the employee anger, the anger with managers. I mean, it was palpable. One company that I was working with early this spring, like like they were just like, they couldn't even learn because they were so angry. They were angry at customers, at each other, at different departments within the organization. It was crazy, right? But they had gone to hostility, right? So hopefully, if you do this mindfully enough, if you think about your long-term goals mindfully enough, you don't go to hostility. But we want to recognize that, kind of, we might be angry that we're busy, if that's our goal. And we have to kind of step back and say, hey, but this is what I wanted. This is what I was looking for. Or I might be angry because I can't have that apple pie. but this is what I wanted. This is part of my goal, right? So we have to kind of, kind of just become a little bit more mindful and a little bit more aware of that. The other model that ties into this that I think is fascinating is this model by Daniel Pink. This came out of his book When. It was a book that he published January of 2019, I think. And it's he calls it the uh-oh effect. But basically, if you read the book, he basically goes through and he talks about any kind of goal that's set with, especially with a team, doesn't kick into gear until the halfway point. And it doesn't matter what the halfway point is. If it's a week, they'll kick in on Wednesday. If it's 6 months, they'll kick in at 3 months. It doesn't matter if it's a day, if it's, 8 hours, you'll kick in the last part of the day, right? But, right, if we think about kind of long term goals and we go back to the previous model, ding, 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 ding. Does this make sense? We were resisting, resisting, resisting the first half. We were in denial the first half. Oh no, we got to like shift gears, right? We're not going to make it. And all of a sudden, this development that we could have done ahead of time if we had the mental awareness to it starts to happen. And then we start to move forward, right? But this has been proven, the uh-oh effect has been proven over and over and over again. And I don't know about you, but I've done it too, right? So I'll put my hand up there, right? Um, so we have to recognize that if we're looking at long-term goals, when, if we're not conscious about it, if we're not really thinking about it, if we're not really committing to it, what can happen is we fall into these traps, right? And these are human traps. These are, kind of built into our DNA in a way, right? So they're not anything that you're going to sit there and say, well, I won't do that. There's a really good possibility that unconsciously you will do that. So, having these tools, being able to look at this, I think is another really good step. So the first good step is, kind of how do I react to setting long-term goals? The second one is, okay, I need to understand that resistance is normal, but how do I deal with that? What can I do around that in order to move myself through these processes a little bit easier, a little bit faster? So when we think about kind of, setting those long-term goals, they really do give us the map or the GPS that we really need to be able to see where we're going, right? And I think all of you, everybody, everyone on the call, right? You know that, gosh, if I know where I'm going, I can get there. If I don't know where I'm going, who knows where I'm going to land up. But even if we know where we're going, right, we may take all the side roads. We might not, kind of, really commit to December 31st of 2021. This is where I want to be. And I will tell you from personal experience, when you keep that goal in your head, when you can, and again, next week we're going to talk about kind of visualizing it, but when you can really keep that goal front of mind, you usually achieve it in almost half the time, right? You really, everything speeds up. The actions you take feel more natural, right? And I'll just use, kind of where I'm living right now here in Sandwich. I had, kind of set a goal when I first moved here that I really wanted to move by the end of that year. And but my time frame was relatively short, and I didn't know if that was actually going to happen. But I said, it'd be really great to be in my house by the holidays. I'm a holiday person. So by the holidays, I want to be in my house by the holidays. Do you know I walked in the front door with the key on December 15th, right? Because I owned it, because, it was just part of me. It wasn't like I was, kind of obsessed with it, but I was just like, I'm going to do this. So where am I going to look today? Who am I going to talk to today? Right? Little acts. But by December 15th, and I should have put a picture on here. I'll do that for the next time, but I literally have a picture of like this Christmas tree that I have that's all candles, and I have it in the window, and I was like literally didn't pack that so I could like put the first decoration up. But again, that's the power. So what we're going to do next is I have just a shortish video that I think really speaks to kind of this thinking bigger, thinking outside of the box, and really kind of tying that to the daily actions. So let me go ahead and key that up, um, and then we'll kind of debrief that.
So I've been futuring, which is a term I made up, about 3 seconds ago. I've been futuring for about 20 years. And when I first started, I would sit down with people and I'd say, hey, let's talk 10, 20 years out. And they'd say, great. And I've been seeing that time horizon get shorter and shorter and shorter. So much so that I met with a CEO 2 months ago and I said, we started our initial conversation. He goes, I love what you do. I want to talk about the next 6 months. We have a lot of problems that we are facing. These are civilizational scale problems. The issue, though, is we can't solve them using the mental models that we use right now to try and solve these problems. Yes, a lot of great technical work is being done, but there's a problem that we need to solve for a priori before, if we want to really move the needle on those big problems. Short-termism, right? There's no marches, there's no bracelets, there's no petitions that you can sign to be against short-termism. I tried to put one up and no one signed. It's so weird. But it prevents us from doing so much. Short-termism, for many reasons, has pervaded every nook and cranny of our reality. So I just want you to take a second and just think about an issue that you're thinking, working on. It could be personal, it could be at work, or it could be move the needle world stuff. And think about how far out you tend to think about the solution set for that. Because short-termism prevents the CEO from buying really expensive safety equipment. It'll hurt the bottom line. So we get the Deepwater Horizon. Short-termism prevents teachers from spending quality one-on-one time with their students. So right now in America, a high school student drops out every 26 seconds. Short-termism prevents Congress, sorry if there's anyone in here from Congress, or not really that sorry, from putting money into a real infrastructure bill. So what we get is the I-35 bridge collapse over the Mississippi a few years ago, 13 killed. It wasn't always like this. We did the Panama Canal. Pretty much have eradicated global polio. We did the Transcontinental Railroad, the Marshall Plan. And it's not just big physical infrastructure problems and issues, women's suffrage, the right to vote. But in our short-termist time, where everything seems to happen right now, and we can only think out past the next tweet or timeline post, we get hyper-reactionary. So what do? We take people who are fleeing their war-torn country, and we go after them. We take low-level drug offenders and we put them away for life. And then we build McMansions without even thinking about how people are going to get between them and their job. It's a quick buck. Now, the reality is for a lot of these problems, there are some technical fixes, a lot of them. I call these technical fixes sandbag strategies, right? So you know there's a storm coming, the levee is broken, no one's putting any money into it. You surround your home with sandbags, and guess what? It works. The storm goes away, the water level goes down, you get rid of the sandbags, and you do this storm after storm after storm. And here's the insidious thing. A sandbag strategy can get you reelected. A sandbag strategy can help you make your quarterly numbers. Now, if we want to move forward into a different future than the one we have right now, because I don't think we've hit, 2016 is not peak civilization. I think there's some more we can do. But my argument is that unless we shift our mental models and our mental maps on how we think about the short, it's not going to happen. And so what I've developed is something called LongPath, and it's a practice. And LongPath isn't a kind of a one-and-done exercise. I'm sure everyone here at some point has done an off-site with a lot of Post-it notes and whiteboards, and you do a long, I was laughing, and you do, no offense to the consultants in here who do that, and you do a long-term plan, and then 2 weeks later, everyone forgets about it, right? Or a week later, if you're lucky, 3 months. It's a practice because it's not necessarily a thing that you do. It's a process where you have to revisit different ways of thinking for every major decision that you're working on. So I'm going to go through those 3 ways of thinking. So the first, transgenerational thinking. I love the philosophers, Plato, Socrates, Habermas, Heidegger. I was raised on them. But they all did one thing that didn't actually seem like a big deal until I really started kind of looking into this. And they all took, as a unit of measure for their entire reality of what it meant to be virtuous and good, the single lifespan, from birth to death. But here's the problem with these issues. They stack up on top of us, but because the only way we know how to do something good in the world is if we do it between our birth and our death. That's what we're programmed to do. If you go to the self-help section in any bookstore, it's all about you, which is great, unless you're dealing with some of these major issues. And so with transgenerational thinking, which is really kind of transgenerational ethics, you're able to expand how you think about these problems. What is your role in helping to solve them? Now, this isn't something that just has to be done at the Security Council chamber. It's something that you can do in a very kind of personal way. So every once in a while, if I'm lucky, my wife and I like to go out to dinner. And we have 3 children under the age of 7. So you can imagine it's a very peaceful, quiet meal. So we sit down, and like literally all I want to do is just like eat and chill, right? And my kids have a completely and totally different idea of what we're going to be doing. And so my first idea is my sandbag strategy, right? It's to go into my pocket and take out the iPhone and give them Frozen or some other best-selling game thing. And then I stop, and I have to kind of put, because I'm doing this, I have to put on this transgenerational thinking cap. I don't do this in the restaurant because it'd be bizarre, but I have to. I did it once, and that's how I learned it was bizarre. And you have to kind of think, okay, I can do this, but what is this teaching them? So what does it mean if I actually bring some paper or engage with them in conversation? It's hard. It's not easy. And I'm making this very personal. It's actually more traumatic than some of the big issues that I work on in the world, is entertaining my kids at dinner. But what it does is it connects them here in the present with me, but it also, and this is the crux of transgenerational thinking and ethics, it sets them up to how they're going to interact with their kids and their kids and their kids. Second, future thinking. When we think about the future, 10, 15 years out, give me a vision of what the future is. You don't have to give it to me, but think it in your head. And what you're probably going to see is the dominant cultural lens that dominates our thinking about the future right now: technology. So when we think about the problems, we always put it through a technological lens, a tech-centric, a techno-utopian. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's something that we have to really think deeply about if we're going to move on these major issues. Because it wasn't always like this, right? The ancients had their way of thinking about what the future was. The church definitely had their idea of what the future could be, and you could actually pay your way into that future, right? And luckily for humanity, we got the scientific revolution. From there, we got the technology. But what has happened, and by the way, this is not a critique. I love technology. There's everything in my house talks back to me, from my children to my speakers to everything. But we've abdicated the future from the high priests in Rome to the high priests of Silicon Valley. And so when we think, well, how are we going to deal with climate or with poverty or homelessness, our first reaction is to think about it through a technology lens. And look, I'm not advocating that we go to this guy. This is not, and I love Joel, don't get me wrong. But I'm not saying we go to Joel. What I'm saying is we have to rethink our base assumption about only looking at the future in one way, only looking at it through the dominant lens, because our problems are so big and so vast that we need to open ourselves up. And so that's why I do everything in my power not to talk about the future. I talk about futures. It opens a conversation again. So when you are sitting and thinking about how do we move forward on this major issue, it could be at home, it could be at work, it could be, again, on the global stage. Don't cut yourself off from thinking about something beyond technology as a fix, because we're more concerned about technological evolution right now than we are about moral evolution. And unless we fix for that, we're not going to be able to get out of short-termism and get to where we want to be. The final, telos thinking, this comes from the Greek root, ultimate aim and ultimate purpose. And it's really asking one question: to what end? When was the last time you asked yourself, to what end? And when was the last time, and when you asked yourself that, how far out did you go? Because long isn't long enough anymore. 3 to 5 years doesn't cut it. It's 30, 40, 50, 100 years. In Homer's epic, the Odyssey, Odysseus had the answer to his what end. It was Ithaca. It was this bold vision of what he wanted to return to Penelope. And I can tell you, because of the work that I'm doing, but also you know it intuitively, we have lost our Ithaca. We have lost our to what end. So we stay on this hamster wheel. And yes, we're trying to solve these problems, but what comes after we solve the problem? And unless you define what comes after, people aren't going to move. You know, the businesses, and this isn't just about business, but the businesses that do consistently, who break out of short-termism, not surprisingly, are family-run businesses. They're transgenerational, they're telos, they think about the futures. And this is an ad for Patek Philippe. They're 175 years old. And what's amazing is that they literally embody this kind of long Pathian sense in their brand. Because, I'll move out of the way. You never actually own a Patek Philippe, and I definitely won't. Unless someone wants to just like throw $25,000 on the stage. You merely look after it for the next generation. So it's important that we remember the future. We treat it like a noun. It's not. It's a verb. It requires action. It requires us to push into it. It's not this thing that washes over us. It's something that we actually have total control over. But in a short-term society, we end up feeling like we don't. We feel like we're trapped. We can push through that. Now I'm getting more comfortable in the fact that at some point in the inevitable future, I will die. But because of these new ways of thinking and doing, both in the outside world and also with my family at home, and when I'm leaving my kids, I get more comfortable in that fact. And it's something that a lot of us are really uncomfortable with. But I'm telling you, think it through. Apply this type of thinking, and you can push yourself past what's inevitably very, very uncomfortable. And it all begins really with yourself asking this question: what is your long path? But I ask you, when you ask yourself that, now or tonight or behind the steering wheel or in the boardroom or the situation room, push past the long path, what's my long path the next 3 years or 5 years? Try and push past your own life if you can, because it makes you do things a little bit bigger than you thought were possible. Yes, we have huge, huge problems out there. With this process, with this thinking, I think we can make a difference. I think you can make a difference, and I believe in you guys. Thank you.
So some powerful things there, right? Powerful concepts, etc. Again, you'll get the link to this so you can watch it again, because there's a lot of micro moments in there that I think are really important, because I know he's talking about big changes. Thanks, Irene. But we also can apply these to our long-term goals, and I'm just gonna it's gonna try and start again. I don't know why it's been doing this, but there. When we start to think about kind of these 3 points, that transgenerational thinking, maybe that applies to your long-term goal, maybe it doesn't, but that futures thinking, right? Really being able to, kind of think beyond the now, think beyond kind of what currently is happening. And, that to what end, I love when he says, what happens like after? We don't think about that, right? When we set a long-term goal, and again, some of you have set like corporate long-term goals, but okay, so we reached our sales goal. What happens after that, right? If we don't tie that to something, then we're just constantly resetting a goal, whatever, and it becomes this chore instead of really achieving and or making a difference and or kind of bettering our life, whatever that might be. So there are a couple kind of ways to break this down really quickly, just to kind of process this, right? And the first is understanding you need that internal motivation, right? To do all the things that he was talking about, you need that internal motivation. An Olympic athlete doesn't wake up one day and say, "Oh, I think tomorrow I'll go to the Olympics," right? There's got to be a lot of that internal motivation. And what I've really kind of one of the ways to be able to tap into that is with kind of Simon Sinek's thought process, right? But applying it to ourselves as, goals or whatever. But, not worrying as much right away about the what and the how, but really trying to understand your why. So if you want your company to grow by 100% next year, why? Why? What's in it? Like what is that going to do, right? Yeah, Brian, exactly, right? It said that you don't plant trees for us, you plant those, for who are coming, who are following, right? So what I would say is you're starting to think about your long-term goals, and you're starting to think about kind of, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? What does that look like? When you start to get an inkling about that, and I have a worksheet that I'm going to send with you when I send the recording, etc. One of the columns is, kind of why, like why do you want to do that? Why do you want to achieve that? And you might not have the answers to those right away, and that's okay, right? You can sit with that. But, when you can identify the why, that's the to what end that he was talking about. That's the Ithaca he was talking about, right? It's really about, understanding, if I understand that why, then that's what's going to carry me through the resistance. That's what's going to get me to the who am I a lot quicker. That's what's going to remind me to take those daily steps that I need to take in order to lose the weight, whatever it is, right? But what I have to be able to go back to that why, and that why has to be internally motivating. It's got to be something that's so important to me that if I don't get it, right, I'll be crushed. Not literally, but you know what I mean, right? I it will affect me. And again, I will tell you, I've applied some of these kind of new thought processes in some of the goals this year, right, that I set or reset or whatever. And that's how I did 40 webinars this summer, right? The why was, I want to see how many people I can help while they're struggling this summer. They don't know how to work from home. I've been working from home for 20 years. I get it. I know how to do it, right? I want to help people. Um, and that was really gratifying, right? So the why not only helps you through the motivation, but it also, when you achieve that goal, it's not just about the number or the whatever at the end of the day. It's like, wow, I did it, right? There's that internal satisfaction. So what you can do next is spend some time dreaming, spend some time thinking about what does it look like next year, what does it look like the year after that. Again, the worksheets that I'll send to you kind of have kind of these lifetime goal pieces in there. And then select one or two of those, right? You can't do everything all at once. And dive into your why. Why do you want to focus on that? Why is that important to you? And from there, you can start to build your plan, right? From there, you can start to say, okay, you know what? I want to be someplace in 5 years. And it's really important to me, and I understand my why. And so next year, this is what I need to do in order to get there, right? And that why will carry you through 5 years really easily, right? Um, what's also interesting over the next two sessions that I have for the webinars, next time we're going to talk about kind of visioning that goal, like putting some pictures on why literally that's important for your brain. And then we're going to talk about the need to take action and overcome maybe some of those obstacles that are resistant, that create resistance that you hadn't really thought about. So again, these are all different tools and pieces that you can use. So, again, a lot of good things to think about. But I want to open it up for questions or comments, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and finish off the recording. For those of you watching the recording, you will get all of this Q&A, etc. When in a document. So I'll put it in an FAQ so everybody has it. All right. So let me go ahead and I'm going to stop this.